Hey guys, now that we've got one set working and we still have some room on the workbench, let's get a fifth Predicta up here. And this is actually the final one of this batch of sets I'm going to be working on. There will be a sixth, but that will just be a chassis. It's being shipped to me, not the whole set. So these are the five that hopefully we can all get working and have them all on at the same time and make for a cool photo op. Alright, this is also the only Debutante. The other four are all Princess models. Debutante, distinctive because it doesn't have arms on it. And the front is a little bit different. This also belongs to Tom, so two of these sets are Tom's, the brown Princess and the Debutante. And this is the hotel set. This is one that's got some instructions up here on how to operate it on the closed circuit motel hotel system. I have already pulled the back off and taken a look at this set. It's in pretty good shape, but it has been worked on before. This is also probably the last production run of these sets, so it should be a run 7 or possibly even something beyond that. I'm not sure exactly what went into making this a hotel set, other than there's no antenna and they put this sticker on it. Alright, let's get to taking this apart. I already powered this up, and I think I included it in an earlier segment. So we know everything's good, but I haven't pulled the chassis out yet, so let's get to that. While removing the chassis from the cabinet, I noticed a number of differences. The lead dressing was different, slightly different position for some of the hardware. I noticed the tuner is very different from all the other sets. And I realized, oh, all the other sets use the 10L43 chassis. This is an 11L43, which is pretty darn similar. Probably 99% similar electrically, but it is slightly different, so I will have to be careful and make sure I use all the correct component values rather than just be blindly cloning one of the other boards. This also might win the award out of all these as being the dustiest, but I suspect this will just all, yeah, that is just fluff. I'll just vacuum right off. It appears to have never been worked on. I don't think this chassis has ever been pulled. Just like Brian's set, all the lead dress, all the little bendy pieces of metal are all exactly as they were when it left the factory. I don't think the speaker connections have ever been removed. Every little bit of masking tape and cardboard and such, everything is still present. So we actually have two rather pristine sets. One Debutante, one Princess. That's cool. So I have pretty high hopes that this will be an easy restore. There is one thing that's been done to it, though. I do believe that this is a replacement. That linearity control is the number one issue I've seen in the 17-inch sets. And this is kind of at an angle. Maybe that's supposed to be that way. I don't know. And I guess this could be the original, but on the other sets, this is riveted, held on with pop rivets. And the insulation isn't just some folded over piece of paper. It's something a little bit more official looking. Also, usually this piece is bent over where that line is, because it's supposed to protect the terminals on the control. But just being straight up, it's not really being very effective. I think this should be like so. Alright, so compressed air vacuum brush, take care of this, and then get out the wire wrap tool and pull this board. Now that I have the chassis out and have vacuumed it off a bit, I'm noticing it's a little more different than I realized it would be. Seems like everything get tweaked a little bit. Slightly different sizes, different position. Even the fusible resistor is bent over on itself for some reason. This terminal strip on the others is a big power resistor in the middle. This has two smaller ones, and the paper cap that is typically here is no longer there. So I'm going to have to be really careful when I go this and actually look at every component value before I replace it to make sure I've got it right. Well, here's something you don't see every day. A complete set of what I do believe may be all original tubes. Certainly all the ones that say Philco Cool chassis. I say that because they all look very similar and they have a date code of 6147, which makes sense for the set being made in 1961, 6143. Now, what is more curious, I think, are these two tubes, which do not say Cool chassis, but they are Philco, 6334, 6317. I don't think they were still making these sets in 63. But, and what are we looking at here? Well, the set may still have well been under warranty or a service contract with Philco. This being from a hotel, so they may have serviced this in 63 and replaced those two tubes, and this one looks a little different too, 6347. So maybe this set was serviced in 63 and had several of the tubes replaced. Maybe this guy as well, all the ones, 6221 maybe. Of course, it doesn't mean that's when it was serviced, that's just when the tube was made. And, of course, notably, these are orange, so we have orange, blue, and white. Does that mean anything? Is it a different color for a different year of manufacture, maybe? No, 6145, so it matches the tubes with the blue printing. Or does the orange simply mean that they were replaced by Philco? Or in 63, did they use orange ink, or 62, I guess, for that one tube? No idea. But it would be cool if all these tubes were still good, and I could continue using them in this set, just to kind of keep it as authentic as possible. I've been comparing the various boards I have out and realized a few things. One, it appears to be identical component values and layout to the Run 7 board that came out of my beige Princess, so I'm going to use that as a reference. And notice they both have green coating over the green silk screening, I should say, on top of the board, whereas the earlier production runs had a yellowish silk screening. I also couldn't help but notice that they used a more robust socket, whereas this still has the thinner metal on it. And in general, I've noticed that the later production run sets, the last model introduced, for example, the Continental, they had addressed a number of the design flaws. They switched to a more reliable picture tube. They switched to more robust sockets. They tweaked a few other things. Which kind of bums me out, because I think if they had made these for a few more years, they could have worked out all the kinks and the quirks and had a really robust design. They were pretty popular at the time, by all accounts, and they sold a bunch of them, and there's still a bunch of them around. But you've seen all the hack repairs that have been done to them. In fact, every issue I've run into on these sets, and I suspect every issue that I'm going to run into, is because of bad, crude repair jobs. Nothing to do with any of the original parts being bad, or any heat issues or anything else like that. I'm also going to switch things up a little bit. I have two more boards to rebuild. This one from Tom's Debutante, and then I've got Randy's. I just have the main board right now. He's shipping the chassis to me as I speak. So I have two more boards to rebuild. But rather than sit down and go through that before getting back to a chassis, I want to kind of jump back and forth because I just rebuilt a chassis and it's fresh in my mind. I don't want to have any of that knowledge fade away. So I think I'll switch back to maybe reinstalling the board in my beige set or Tom's mahogany princess, one of these two, one of the first two that I did, and kind of hop back and forth between restuffing boards and wiring them back up. I'd like to get another one working this weekend and to have all 6 of these done by the end of April. I decided that Tom's Princess would be the next set to get reassembled and powered up. I think that was the second board that I did. So the board is all ready to go. This is the one that had the charred through area around the damper tube. I'm going to do a better repair on that before I reinstall the board, otherwise it's ready to plop back in. I also took out the IF board and I'm working on it, just about done. This set, although it was dirty, just with a little bit of vacuuming and compressed air, I cleaned up pretty nice. I don't have to use any drastic chemicals on this. That's a nice change. Now with the IF board out, I'm going to rebuild this area. I already took out the old electrolytics. I'm going to be mounting the new ones here again. And notice there is a variation between these chassis. I think the previous one I did, this terminal strip, I think was moved back further. For some reason over time they kind of adjusted. On some of them they're closer to the IF board, sometimes they're further away. The only reason that really matters is in terms of mounting stuff like the diodes on this terminal strip, you have to figure out which side you want to put them on. In this case they're going to be on the side away from the IF board. So we're going to replace those 2 with beefier silicon diodes, put a couple electrolytics here. And this fusible resistor holder unfortunately got damaged. One side of it broke off the phenolic base, but it's still usable, so I think we'll forge ahead with it. I don't think I have any spares. Plus it's in pretty good shape, other than I think I could probably glue that back into position and it would hold up pretty well. So far everything is going very smoothly. Power supply for the B Plus has been rebuilt. The restuffed IF board has been reinstalled. This terminal strip has been rebuilt. New power resistor and filter caps. Now this set, unlike many of the others, has a good linearity control and width control, so don't have to monkey with that. It's just a matter of moving the wires aside. We'll brush off some of this dirt. Unlike like the other chassis, this is just dusty. No corrosion to strip off or cigarette goo to clean off. As soon as that board is reinstalled, throw in some tubes, hook up a picture tube, and try powering it up. I'm almost done wiring in the rebuilt board, but I paused because I wanted to point out a few things to you guys. One is vintage plastic wiring can get very sticky and attract a lot of dirt and dust and whatnot. From what I've heard, it's the plasticizers leaching out of the plastic, which is a sticky, oily kind of substance. Isopropyl alcohol does a great job cleaning it off. Just soak a paper towel in it, run it up and down the wires, and look like new. Another thing is the wires. I've mentioned when I wrap and unwrap these, they're brittle and they tend to break off, and I'm sure some of you have encountered that if you've ever tried working on one of these. The reason being is this is copper wire and it gets work hardened, meaning when the wire gets wrapped around that little post with all those corners and wrapped around and around and around and around, puts a lot of stress and strain on the metal, which makes it more brittle. It's like working steel, like tempering it. You can undo that, as at least one of you mentioned, by using a lighter or some other heat source. You need to get it pretty hot, kind of towards glowing red. And it does work. A couple issues. One, this insulation is like wax soaked cotton on the outside with plastic on the inside, it catches on fire, or at least blackens if you get it hot. The other is, if you use a lighter, it's very sooty and it will leave the wire black. I think these wires may be tin plated, but it's not very thick, or the copper has just discolored, but no, it's very pliable. I could do that on all the wires and then straighten them out and then put them into my wire wrapping tool and wrap them back down. That's a ton of work. So generally what I do is I snap it off to where there's only about ½ an inch left, wrap a few turns around and solder it in. But there are some wires that are like jumpers. They are jumpers. They just go from one point of the board to another. In my haste to remove the board, I undid some of those. I need to replace them. Rather than reusing the original wire, I'm going to use some new wire, and that gives me a chance to demonstrate how the wrapping portion of this works. So there's one point on here. It says vertical sync here and horizontal sync here. These two connect together. It carries the sync pulse from the sync separated tube to the vertical and horizontal oscillator circuits. So I'm going to strip off about 3/4 of an inch. So one downside to this wire wrapping tool, which is kind of a minor one, is you can only do about 3/4 of an inch of stripped wire. Whereas the originals, if you straighten this out, it's probably 1.5 inches. And they put on maybe 10 turns. This will only do maybe 4 turns, which I think is more than sufficient. So it's going to go off that way. So the end of this, there's a large hole in the middle. That's what goes over your post. Smaller hole to the side, that's where you insert your stripped wire. And go down over the post and hold the bit of wire firmly and rotate the tool around, and that's it. That's why they did this. It's fast. And we need to route it over to about here, and I'll need some extra length so we can strip it. That should be good. Wrap down the other end. Goes over here. One of you did send me a link and a message about a homemade tool for wrapping and unwrapping. I did get it. I did watch your video. I may give it a try if I get a chance. I'm not that great at fabricating things. It'll look pretty simple. But for right now, at least on this one, I'm going to stick with the tool that I just picked up. That's it. So I have a few more to do, and these are easy because the wires are all very distinctly different colors. I can compare it to my sample chassis. We need to remount this. This one has a good linearity and width control, so I don't have to deal with any of that. So you guys want to take odds on will this work? I'm pretty confident this is just going to work. Why do I say that? Because this was in one of the better conditions of any of the sets. So, well, we shall see. We shall see. I may have to eat that. Ah, not so fast. I was mistaken. Didn't realize there was a groove on the shaft opposite that small hole. I just wasn't lining up my wire very carefully. You can put on basically as much stripped wire as you like. See, I was getting stuck here and I thought that was it. But no, just didn't get it lined up right. It comes out through here and it can just go off for as long as you like. So that is not an issue. This is the B plus 400 volt. It goes over here and over here. So we gotta put another jumper in. Plenty of stripped wire on this guy. Alright. Getting close. Alrighty, I think we're good. Gone over every connection. Everything appears to be correct. Populated all the tubes. So it's time to power it up. Now my original plan was not to take the CRT head and tuner out of every set. However, There is a capacitor that needs to get replaced on the tuner, and it should be cleaned and lubed, so yeah, I'll be pulling that out. And this particular is especially filthy, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this, because I'm curious to see how nicely is this going to clean up. I expect all this filth is just going to run off. But first off, let's make sure it works. So Phillips screw, the back of the neck, lift the whole thing up. 3 sheet metal screws underneath the tuner, pull that out, and hook everything up. Oh, and I'll leave the speaker in because I happen to have a spare handy. Tuner looks alright. There's that one capacitor that should get replaced. But when I went to pull off the knobs, there was some resistance and kind of crunchy sound, and well, it turns out that the fine tuning knob is cracked, and they had wrapped a bunch of scotch tape around it many years ago, which is completely hardened up and cracked. It's melted there. But I don't think they tried to glue it, which is what I'm going to try to do. Yeah, it's completely, there's nothing holding it on but that tape. I just kind of pushed it down into position. That's good, because that means we have good, clean surfaces to glue from. I suppose I will try epoxy. Ooh, it's cracked all the way along one side, too. Not impossible to find replacements, but I don't know if I have any spares. Anyways, it's not that big a deal. We can make it work. Let's get the picture tube up here next. Now there's a cardstock insert that should be here in the neck of the CRTs, but this is not how it's supposed to go. It's supposed to isolate the video wire. All the rest should go down inside. This is how it's supposed to be. There's one wire by itself. Why? Video signal. This is the one wire that's carrying sensitive high frequency information. So we want to keep it away from the other wires to prevent crosstalk or any noise pickup. Everything is all hooked up. I want to put the rectifier tube back in and noticed a slight problem. It has a nice crack on top. Let's see if the camera can pick that up. It's split right down in there. So I took one from another set. We are good to go. As before, the fuse is out, so we are just going to be powering up the filaments. First time around. Here we go. We're in current mode. The set is off. Turning it on. Ooh, and we are looking good. We're drawing 3/4 of an amp or so. Glow, 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 glow. Everything is glowing. Yes. Alright, let's go for it. Fusible resistor has been installed. I have a test pattern generator hooked up. Let's give it a try. Current draw is higher now. We're sitting at around 1.25 amps. We've got noise out of the speaker. Looks like we got a raster coming up. Yeah, this must be brightness. Screen looks kind of weird, like really out of focus. It's a vertical hold, it's horizontal hold. Kind of expecting to see snow. Well, the tuner's doing something. It must be a test pattern generator. Trying to fine tuning. This tuner's a bit dirty, but obviously no video. Playing with the contrast control. Huh. It's kind of weird. Promising. Obviously, the fact that I can turn this on and we've got a rap, so we've got sound coming out of the speaker and the tuner is doing something, that's not bad. So there is, okay, yeah, there's definitely snow there. But the screen is weird, where it's kind of like out of focus up top and at the bottom, but sort of in focus in the middle. Oh, hey, whoa. This tuner's a little janky. Needs a little work, but hey, how about that? Let's see, can we get vertical hold? Ooh. Something's up with the vertical. I'll have to take a look at that. But, hey, we've got a test pattern. Trying to contrast control again. Contrast control is doing what it should be. Brightness is doing what it should be. Oh, I think it just had the brightness cranked up way too high. It's part of the problem. But definitely we don't have... Maybe it's the linearity is just really jacked up. Let's try adjusting that. The raster's not going up to the top of the screen, and it's scrunched and kind of weirdly out of focus up at the top. Let's try height control. Height control works, but it wants to stay all kind of scrunched at the bottom. It's not getting full deflection. Could be our boost voltage is low. Could be our vertical output tube is not. That might be a little weak. Let's try a different test tone. That's getting kind of annoying. And how about a different test pattern? Yeah, well, I mean, now it's really, really obvious that the top half of the vertical is whacked out. I popped in a new old stock 6DR7 and look at that, which is great. The only issue I have with it is I checked the 6DR7 that had been in there on a tube tester, my Hickok 600A, which has been refurbished and calibrated, and it tests good on both sections. So, I know, the old adage, the only real test of a tube is in a working set, but geez. I mean, that tube must be really, really bad for it to have that messed up an image. Just playing around with the height and linearity a little bit. Now, clearly there's something a little goofy. So you hear the sound kind of cutting out and the picture jumps occasionally. Could be loose connection. Could be dirty. Well, I know the tuner's dirty. I'm just barely touching the fine tuning, and it's cutting in and out pretty bad. Things are gradually getting better and better. What made the biggest difference was putting the local distance switch on the back of the set in the proper position. I completely forgot about that. I also swapped out the old dual selenium AFC diodes for a modern Schottky dual diode, and tried swapping out a few other tubes, and Well, here's where we're at. It's looking a lot better. It's more stable, but there's still that squiggle at the top. So I believe what's happening is it's taking, as the screen draws left to right, top to bottom, it gets to the bottom, wraps around again, it's having trouble locking. And it's taking 20, 30, 40 scan lines to lock and steady down. But even then, there's still a little squiggle even like halfway through the picture. So something is kind of resonating, oscillating that shouldn't be. And well, there is a coil called a ringing coil, which is in this circuit, and it's supposed to help stabilize things. Well, if I tweak it a little, I can make things much worse. But I can't make them perfect. I got too far the other way. It just dies. So that's the one thing I can't quite peg down yet. But otherwise, it's looking pretty. Oh, and this image is off a bit to the left too, which again has to do with, I think, synchronizing. If I tweak the horizontal hole, I can get the picture centered. But now we're getting really unstable. The squiggles are getting really bad. And if I change channels and go back to this, well, sometimes it doesn't really want to lock, because I'm kind of like at the edge of things just completely becoming unstable. Ideally, your hold controls, you kind of put them in the middle of their range and everything looks pretty good. You shouldn't have to be right at the edge of something, the edge of breaking into instabilities to get your screen centered. The only issue I've got with this kind of troubleshooting at this point is, what do? Because we've replaced just about everything. So swap tubes, and I have swapped a few, and I've been surprised, like with that 6DR7 and how much of a difference it can make. I put a different 6CG7 in here, and it made things much worse. So I went. Actually, no, I pulled a new one out. I dipped into my stash, and I've been replacing some of these tubes with new old stock ones. I also replaced the high voltage tube and the horizontal output tube. And everything made a little bit of an incremental improvement. But nothing has really had much effect at all on that squiggle. There's the modern dual diode I put in down there. One thing that would probably help is if I get a scope out, because they do give you sample waveforms. I'm also going to look through the Philco service info, because it's pretty darn comprehensive. There are instructions on how to adjust this coil rather than just blindly turning it and see what happens. But they might have a troubleshooting section and says, hey, if you've got horizontal ringing, check XYZ. Some service info goes to that level. Well, they'll have a troubleshooting chart, a table of problems and stuff to check. But otherwise, it's been quite stable. I've had it running for about half an hour now, and no issues have cropped up. So I think this is a good time to break off. So, second Predicta, well, power up was certainly successful in that, hey, I mean, all the major stuff works, but and that's often the way it goes with this stuff. It's the last 10%, last 15% that takes 90% of the time to figure out. Hopefully it won't take too long. Also, I'm curious to try cleaning this set, because this is the filthiest one. This one was definitely around some smoker. So while I've got it apart, I am going to go ahead and completely disassemble the cabinet and clean up that. The cabinet front is quite nasty, and so is the CRT housing. I will leave you with a look at the front of this cabinet. That should be white, not this nicotine brown kind of color. Alright, when we pick up on the next installment, hopefully I'll have a little bit of an update on this set, and we're going to dive into assembling one of the others and doing a power-up.